I was holding the letter with hands that didn't feel like mine anymore, and the first thing I noticed wasn't what it said, but how my chest refused to breathe. The room felt smaller, the walls closer, like they were listening. I remember thinking that whatever was written on that paper had already happened before I even read it. Some truths don't wait for permission. They just arrive and take something from you. I could feel it before my eyes even focused on the words. Something inside my family had been rotten for a very long time, and I was standing right on top of it. I didn't find the letter by accident. At least, it doesn't feel like an accident anymore. I had gone back to my childhood home because my mother insisted I take a few boxes she didn't want anymore. Old documents, photos, things she said were just taking space. That house always smelled the same, a mix of dust and something sweet that made me feel safe and uneasy at the same time. Walking through those rooms felt like stepping into a version of myself I thought I had outgrown. I told myself I was just there to help, just there for a few hours. I didn't know that the house was waiting for me to remember things I had been taught to forget. The letter was inside a book I used to love as a teenager. I recognized the worn-out cover immediately. It felt almost deliberate, like someone had hidden it where I would eventually look. The paper was yellowed, folded too many times, soft at the edges. It wasn't addressed to me. That was the first strange thing. It wasn't addressed to anyone. No name. Just words that felt too heavy to exist without a destination. Before all of this, my family looked normal. Not perfect, but solid. My parents had been married for decades. My mother was calm, controlled, the kind of woman who believed silence could solve most problems. My father was present in that quiet way, always there, always reliable, never dramatic. I grew up believing that whatever darkness existed in the world stayed outside our walls. Inside, we had rules, routine, and a sense of belonging that I thought nothing could break. Even my own marriage felt built on that same foundation. I had chosen my wife because she felt familiar in the best way. Safe. Honest. She knew my family, spent holidays with us, laughed at the same stories I had heard 100 times. When I imagined my future, it was an extension of my past. I didn't know how fragile that illusion was. I didn't know how much of my life had been shaped by a hidden truth that was never supposed to surface. As I read the first lines of the letter, I felt a strange resistance inside me. Part of me wanted to stop, to put it back where I found it, and pretend it never existed. But another part, a darker and more curious part, needed to know. The words were careful, emotional, written by someone who was afraid but also tired of being silent. There was regret in every sentence. Regret and love tangled together in a way that made my stomach tighten. The letter talked about a decision made many years ago. A decision that changed the course of several lives. It didn't name names right away, and that uncertainty was worse than clarity. I could feel my mind racing ahead, trying to fill in the gaps, trying to protect me from the worst possibilities. But the letter didn't rush. It unfolded slowly, like it wanted me to suffer through every realization instead of jumping straight to the pain. As I stood there, memories began to shift. Moments that once felt harmless now carried a different weight. The way my mother avoided certain topics. The way my father would leave the room when specific relatives were mentioned. The tension I had always sensed but never questioned. It was all there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for me to grow old enough or brave enough to see it. The letter spoke of a forbidden relationship, one that was never meant to be discovered. It wasn't described as passionate or reckless. It was described as quiet, confusing, born out of loneliness and fear. That made it worse. There was no clear villain, no obvious monster. Just people making choices they thought they could bury. People who underestimated how far the consequences would reach. I remember sitting down on the edge of my old bed, the same one I used to lie on as a kid, staring at the ceiling and wondering how many nights this secret had been in this house with me. How many dinners, birthdays, arguments, and reconciliations had happened while this truth remained hidden, shaping everything from behind the scenes. Family secrets have a way of breathing, even when no one acknowledges them. As I kept reading, I realized the letter wasn't just about the past. It was a warning. A confession meant to prevent history from repeating itself. That's when my thoughts went to my wife. To the small, strange moments I had brushed off. Her discomfort around certain family members. The way she would change the subject when I talked about my childhood. I had always assumed it was shyness, or my imagination. Now, doubt settled in my chest like something heavy and cold. The letter mentioned a child. A child who grew up believing one story while living another. A child who was loved but never fully protected from the truth. I felt my throat tighten. I started to understand that this wasn't just about betrayal between adults. It was about identity. About growing up with a hidden truth woven into your blood, shaping who you are without your consent. I wanted to confront my mother immediately. I wanted to demand answers, to hear her voice crack or confirm my worst fears. But I couldn't move. Part of me was afraid that once the truth was spoken out loud, there would be no way to contain it. That my marriage, my sense of self, my entire understanding of where I came from would fracture beyond repair. When I finally left the house, the letter folded inside my jacket, the world outside felt unreal. Cars passed, people laughed. Life went on as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I carried a hidden truth now, one that burned in my thoughts every second. I looked at my phone, at messages from my wife, and felt a distance I had never felt before. Love didn't disappear. It twisted. It became complicated, layered with fear and suspicion. Over the next few days, I started noticing things I couldn't ignore anymore. Conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Old photos missing from albums. Stories that didn't quite line up when told by different people. It felt like pulling on a thread and realizing the entire fabric of my family was coming undone. Each small discovery raised more questions than answers. I felt trapped between wanting the full truth and wanting to preserve the life I had built. The psychological toll was constant. I questioned my own memories. I wondered if I had ever truly known the people closest to me. Betrayal doesn't always come from an obvious act. Sometimes it comes from years of silence, from choosing comfort over honesty. And sometimes, the most painful betrayal is realizing that the people you trusted most believed you couldn't handle the truth. The tension between my wife and me grew heavier. She sensed something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to explain. I was afraid of what she might already know. Afraid that the letter wasn't just revealing my family's dark past, but also exposing a present built on half-truths. The fear of discovering something that couldn't be undiscovered became unbearable. One night, unable to sleep, I reread the letter from start to finish. This time, I noticed the final lines more clearly. The writer spoke about guilt, about living with the consequences of a shocking discovery that should have been addressed long ago. They apologized, not just for what they did, but for what they allowed to continue. That apology felt directed at me, even though my name was never written. I realized then that the secret wasn't just about who loved whom. It was about a hidden truth regarding my own origins. About the possibility that the man I called my father might not be my biological father. That the forbidden relationship mentioned wasn't distant or abstract, but directly connected to my existence. The ground beneath me felt like it disappeared. When I finally confronted my mother, her silence said more than any words could. She didn't deny it. She didn't confirm it outright either. She cried in a way I had never seen before, like someone mourning a life that could never be fixed. She told me that some choices are made in moments of fear, and that fear can echo for generations. She told me she thought she was protecting me. The climax wasn't explosive. There was no screaming, no dramatic confession that tied everything neatly together. It was devastating in a quieter way. I learned that my family had been built around a lie, carefully maintained out of love and shame. That my identity had been shaped by a hidden truth everyone agreed never to speak of. There was no villain to hate, no simple resolution to cling to. The aftermath has been the hardest part. I still love my family, but that love is different now. It's heavier, more fragile. I look at my wife and wonder how much of her hesitation was intuition, how much she sensed the dark past I was blind to. We are still together, but there's a silence between us that didn't exist before. Healing doesn't follow a straight line when the wound is this deep. I think about that letter often. About how a few pages of paper were enough to dismantle a lifetime of certainty. Family secrets don't stay buried forever. They wait. They grow roots. And when they surface, they don't just reveal the past. They force you to question who you are and who you're willing to become. If you've ever felt that something in your family didn't quite add up, that there was a hidden truth lingering just beneath the surface, you're not alone. Some stories aren't meant to scare us. They're meant to remind us that silence has a cost. And sometimes, sharing what we've lived through is the only way to make sense of the pieces left behind.